In 2014, Laverne Cox said that misgendering trans people is an act of violence. Since then, she has repeated this statement multiple times, but some people still don't want to believe it.
An act of violence. Really?
So I thought I'd explain why intentionally misgendering trans people is an act of violence and why you shouldn't do it.
Oh, this is going to be good. I can feel it.
But to get started, we need some definitions. Misgendering is the act of referring to someone by the wrong gender or implying that they are a gender that they are not. So if you call a boy she or refer to him as a girl, that's misgendering. You can misgender cis people or trans people, but it's particularly dehumanizing when done to trans people.
How exactly is that taking away their human qualities? Although, you're going to prove later in the video that you don't care about definitions, so...
And it's something that basically all trans people have to deal with at some point.
Well, you can either grow a thicker hide or become a victim, but knowing that you're a feminist, I can kind of guess what you're about to do.
Violence is a harder thing to define. Several dictionaries say that it involves the use of physical force, including the Merriam-Webster and Oxford dictionaries. However, dictionaries are not intended as all-knowing, unchangeable rulebooks. They change and adapt over time as our usage changes. They are almost always descriptive rather than prescriptive nowadays.
Oh, the irony.
I would argue that their definition of violence is outdated and doesn't encompass all of the forms of violence we recognize today. And the World Health Organization agrees with me.
Okay, they're wrong too. What's your point?
In their 2002 World Report on Violence and Health, the WHO defined violence as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group or community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation.
Riley, I dare you to walk up to someone who has experienced a real rape, or someone who has lost a family member, or someone who has been beaten to a bloody pulp, and say, yeah, I understand what you're going through because someone misgendered me once. Someone called me a bitch once. Someone made fun of me. I dare you to walk up to someone who has experienced pain, real, physical, real pain, and say that to them. You don't get to just change definitions whenever it fits your narrative, and when it doesn't, in a natural way, with connotations like the word feminism and feminist, just ignore it. No, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Given that this is the definition that experts on the topic of violence have come up with, I would argue that it's a much better and more effective definition than the one currently listed in most dictionaries.
If you keep broadening your definition of violence like that, where it comes to now it's psychological as well, so if someone calls you a name that you don't like, or they make fun of your logic, or they make fun of the way you talk, all of a sudden now that's violence. When do we get to the point where any negative criticism is now considered violence? When do we get to that point? If you keep broadening the definition of what violence is, we have the same situation as when feminists defined rape. Because now, if you just catcall a girl, or you call her cute without her consent, even though you're supposed to get her consent to call her cute or something, I don't know, then that constitutes as rape. So, at what point do we say, that's a little much. I wouldn't call that, I wouldn't call that violence, I would just call that being a dick.
For violence does include psychological violence, and misgendering a trans person is absolutely an act of psychological violence.
Once again, tell a rape victim that. I want to know how it goes.
Ask any trans person and they can tell you how awful being misgendered makes them feel. It's a way of invalidating their identity. It makes them feel disrespected, isolated, uncomfortable, and hated simply because of their gender.
Validating someone else's imaginary gender isn't my problem, nor is it my responsibility, so stop acting like it is.
According to the 2014 National Transgender Discrimination Survey, 4.6% of the US population reported that they have attempted suicide at some point in their life, while that number was about 41% for trans people. However, studies show that having a supportive family, like people who don't misgender you, can greatly reduce that rate.
Support doesn't equal going along with someone's delusional gender that doesn't exist. It just doesn't. There's two. There's two genders.
Misgendering contributes to a culture where violence against trans people is terrifyingly prevalent. A 2013 study by the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs found that trans people, and particularly trans women of color, were murdered at much higher rates than other LGBT+ people. Misgendering may not cause someone to go out and murder a trans person, but it does contribute to a culture in which hating and disrespecting trans people is the norm, which does allow some people to justify violence against trans people.
Do you really think someone that far gone is really gonna care? Like, seriously, do you think a murderer really cares that much if he's going to murder someone, he's so far gone, it's too late. It's the murderer's fault, not mine.
However you look at it, misgendering trans people causes real harm.
No, it doesn't.
That applies to all trans people, not just the ones you like. Because there are some not so great trans people in this world, just as there are some not so great cis people.
Ayy.
If you misgender someone just because you disagree with them, you're basically telling all the trans people around you that their humanity is conditional, and that the second you don't agree with them, their identity goes back to being invalid.
That doesn't mean their humanity is conditional. I just think they're a moron for thinking that and wanting me to call them something that doesn't exist.
There are so many ways you can insult someone without disrespecting all trans people.
Oh, give me a break. Just because I make one comment about someone's gender, all of a sudden I'm being offensive to all trans people? Come on.
But once you know someone's gender, if you continue to misgender them, that's when you get into violent territory. Yes, it can be tricky to switch over to new pronouns or a new name for someone, but if you respect them, or trans people at all, you need to do it.
Keep pushing the "you're either with all of us or you're against all of us" narrative. I bet it'll stop the next Trump from getting elected.
And all of this includes non-binary people. If someone asks you to use they, them pronouns, just do it. If you need help accepting the validity of these pronouns, I've made an entire video on the subject.
Must resist urge to make another video that's way too old.
Non-binary identities are valid as well, and if you need help accepting that, I also have a video on that topic that will be linked down below.
Alright, now it just sounds like you're asking for it.
So, intentionally misgendering trans people is an act of violence. It causes direct psychological harm and contributes to a culture where physical violence against trans people is commonplace.
Alright, I'm done.
Oh yeah, and by the way, that like button, it's kind of lonely, you know. I think people have been misgendering it a little bit, you know. It really needs your validation, bros. You might need to slap that like button a little bit, you know. Make it known that you care. Just make it known. And that subscribe button, let me tell you, that subscribe button, it's really feeling like it needs to be validated by someone. And I can't validate it because, you know, why would you make another account and subscribe to your own channel? That sounds a little bit narcissistic. So I'm asking you guys, please validate the subscribe button. It feels really horrible. So, until next time, I'm On Bump, signing off.